and he's the 19-year-old, so he's the youngest member of Doge's team. But the site that he was running, the analysis of web traffic shows that there are these URLs, and the most shocking ones, yes, talking about the sale of child sexual abuse materials.
I mean, among the links you reported, child-porn.store, kkk-is-cool.club.
Hey, it's Jordan. I am in Flint, Michigan, East Palestine, Ohio, Tumwa, Iowa. Please support the only independent outlet on the ground covering what the corporate media covers up.
Hey, it's Jordan. Happy to be joined by Caleb Ikarma. You're a reporter with Musk Watch, which of all the Musk Watchers, I've been following you guys, you and Jed Legume. You've been doing great reporting, exposing a lot of, I don't know what you would call them at this point, President Musk, Vice President Musk's activities. I'll start with something that seems just brazenly corrupt. You guys reported the other day, Musk's associates were granted access to confidential info about his own competitors. So basically, as he's been combing through the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, which he seems to want to eliminate, they have had access to proprietary information from competitors, including digital wallets and other information. Could you tell us what you found?
Yeah, so people that we've spoken to at the CFPB, they've talked about, we're trying to figure out essentially what could Musk want at the CFPB. It's something he's very obsessed with, obviously. Getting rid of the agency, or really just like gutting it, I guess, is what the approach that they're taking, is going to lead to a cleaner regulatory path for X to launch its like payment app. So it's like he wants X to sort of become the WeChat for the Western world. Whereas WeChat in China, it's like they do digital payments, they have a search engine, they have all, it's a sort of like an everything app, as he, calls X. And so at the CFPB, not only getting rid of it, will sort of clear the way for X to have its money app, but also for, X to get information on Venmo, CashApp, Zelle, all these other digital payment processors. And that information that they can get at the CFPB is called the confidential supervisory information. Now, this information, despite it being confidential, is not classified, in the federal sense. So this is information that his aides from Doge could get at the CFPB, and it includes stuff like, the evaluation of loans or credit reports, non-public enforcement actions, internal documents discussing supervisory matters, all sorts of proprietary information, how many customers they have, how many transactions they process. And this is for, again, like Zelle, Cash App, and Venmo, the kings of the digital payment processing world. So that's what he could potentially get by combing through this information that they're collecting.
So in sports terms, it's basically he has access to his opponent's playbook before the game. He also would have potential access, any criminal investigations into those outlets that aren't public, any ethical concerns that were being investigated. So it's not just the proprietary information, it's he could weaponize private information about his competitors, including potential wrongdoing.
Correct. Yes. I mean, there is sort of almost limitless possibilities for what he could access about his competitors in this very, competitive space of digital payment processors that is becoming, there's stories every few months or so how people, between the ages of 17 and 35 or whatever, don't really have bank accounts anymore because they use, Zelle, Cash App, PayPal, like these sort of processors. So this is going to be a huge, even bigger than it is now in the next 5 years. So this is, it's going to be a huge cash cow for X if he's able to get people to buy into his idea of the payment service on the social media platform.
And this idea, I mean, he was asked about it during whatever the hell that spectacle was yesterday with him next to Trump in the Oval Office about like potential conflicts of interest. And he said, essentially, I'm monitoring myself. But what are the typical guardrails here? Does he have government clearance to look into these things? There's a lot of things that he and Trump have been doing that are by experts are saying are just, there's no gray area. It's illegal. Is he currently breaking and entering into these systems, or because the president has given him permission, it's okay?
Basically that, yes. If the president does it, it's not illegal. That's sort of that argument, but extended out to this richest man in the world who is sort of co-leading the country in a way. I mean, you saw him sitting next to the Resolute desk
Right.
as the president was basically sidelined, and he's sort of talking about this grand reconstruction project that they're undergoing, while Trump just sort of sits there, placated and quiet. So it's
Right.
it's a very striking scene for sure.
Right. And can you talk about there's been a lot of talk about his Doge crew, which are mostly like 20 somethings. Some of them, it seems, right out of high school or right out of college. You guys broke a story, I think it was yesterday, that one of the Doge teens that does or does not have the right clearance to go through these agencies had a really suspect image sharing site with links to URLs that reference pedophilia, the KKK, rape. This obviously is quite troubling.
Yeah. So there, this is a story where there is a lot that we don't know, but what we do know is disturbing, right? So what we don't know is whether or not these URLs, which yes, reference the sale of child sexual abuse materials, they reference the KKK, racial slurs, rape, also the drug, like rape, date rape drugs, and those sorts of things. Um, so basically, his website offered a service to users that they could create custom URLs to link to content hosted on his site. And it was an image sharing site sort of dedicated to Discord users. And, there's Discord generally is just used for people to talk to each other while they're gaming, but there are all these, these huge communities on there of, I would maybe describe them as somewhat disturbed, isolated, antisocial individuals who kind of, group up together and sort of egg each other on into more and more noxious behaviors. And so that kind of colors the scene of crowds that his name is Edward Korstein. I'm not sure how to pronounce his name exactly, his last name. It's the one that Elon has referred to as big balls repeatedly, both on Twitter and elsewhere. And he's the 19-year-old, so he's the youngest member of Doge's team. But the site that he was running, the analysis of web traffic shows that there are these URLs, and the most shocking one, yes, talking about the sale of child sexual abuse materials. Again, we don't know if he made these URLs. We don't know if someone a fellow traveler of his made the URLs that was using his site. That's something we're looking further into. But
I mean, among the links you reported, child-porn.store, KKK is cool.club. This is all from the Wayback Machine, but clearly,
yes, and this is traffic compiled by BuiltWith, which sort of traffics inbound and outbound traffic to websites. So if you went to the childporn.store website, it would redirect you to his Corsestein's website, which was Tesla Sexy. That content that may have been redirected to on his site no longer exists. So we don't know what they were hosting with those URLs, or if it was just a URL that directed his site specifically. But certainly disturbing, to say the least, as far as the content being referenced in these URLs.
I'm assuming that if this was a traditional, you apply for a job in the federal government, there's background check, these things would typically be flagged. But because this is all kind of the wild, wild west, and Elon Musk has been given the keys to these agencies, there might be a lot of problematic backgrounds that are getting through anyway without a real vetting.
Right. I mean, even for one of these agencies, for instance, CFPB, three of Musk, I think it's maybe four now, have been granted. I will say we know of at least three that have been granted administrator domain privileges on the CFPB system. The process for that typically is something that would take a year before somebody would be fully vetted up to that point. They did it in, less than a week, essentially, as far as we know. So, that's just one example. I mean, you can extrapolate that out to all of these other different agencies that they're at: OPM, GSA, to the Treasury system, of course, is a very big one. Getting access to these systems, the threat assessment reports that you have to go through, and the personal vetting too, of course, usually takes a very, very long time. And none of that took place here. And they just say, oh, they've been vetted and that's it, we're good. And that's basically the end of the story.
And putting aside the problematic, moral question of whatever this guy was involved with, we also don't know what access they had, because Musk and Trump people said they only had read-only access to a lot of these agency systems, but then it's come out that no, they actually had read and write privileges. So it's not clear what access they had or what they were able to do or not do. Is that correct?
Correct. And I mean, this is sort of flies in the face of what Musk said in that meeting next to the Resolute desk yesterday, which is, saying that we're trying to be as transparent as possible. We post all of our actions on X and on the Doge website. And clearly that isn't true because, 1 second they'll come out saying they have only read access at, say, the Treasury or CFPB. And then the next second it's privilege, like administration privileges, where they can alter the code, they can revoke privilege of other people who have access to the systems, they can provide access to other people who did not previously have it. So basically, it's the keys to the kingdom. Like they get everything, and these systems are getting access to for the most part.
I mean, essentially, it's a digital coup, is what it sounds like to me.
Yeah, I mean, it is a massive change in the way the federal government operates and has operated for decades. I think,
well, if it wasn't Trump involved, and we just heard this as a news article, it would be considered a data breach.
Right. Yeah.
Right. Let me also ask you, because not to ask you to psychoanalyze, but obviously Elon Musk doesn't need the money. He's not doing this necessarily for money. I mean, maybe that there's some to it, but from your reporting, why does he want all of this access? Because it doesn't really seem like efficiency is he's not an efficiency nerd. He's just basically doing what he did at Tesla, Twitter, and now the government with all these layoffs, this and that. But why do you think, based on your reporting, he wants access to social security numbers, private data, medical history? I mean, across the board, why would he want access to all that?
That's I mean, it's a tough one to answer because, there are points of his contact with the government that have clear conflict of interest, sort of just painted all over them, like his involvement at the CFPB. But then there are other things that feel more opaque, like his work at the Office of Personnel Management, which, as you referenced, all the social security numbers, medical histories, et cetera, that the Doge team will have access to. I don't know. I don't think I can speculate, fully on what they're driving at with that stuff, other than mass layoffs, other than, finding government employees on their probationary periods, which means that they can just get rid of them without dealing with union problems or sort of legal backlash. So I think that's a big part of it. And I think the bigger picture for Musk is really like his quest to get to Mars. I think it's something that he talks about very often when he talks publicly, even about sort of, saving the United States, like fixing the budget, basically creating like a stable government and a stable budget so that we have the money to start a colony on Mars. It's something he talked about with the leader of the AfD, the far right party in Germany, when he was having his Twitter discussion with her. He also talked about this idea that these Western nations need to basically get their act together, in his eyes, so that everyone can get to Mars and start interplanetary colonization. And that's, I mean, it sounds ludicrous, but that's what he gets at so often when he talks about big picture stuff of why he's so passionate about changing the government.
Well, speaking of, as he's standing up there, in my view, feigning interest in government efficiency, he was just given another, or SpaceX, excuse me, which just received another $38 million contract yesterday from the federal government. So clearly, he's getting something for all his supposed volunteer work. So
Yeah.
what are your thoughts on that? There's also reports that the Trump administration has directed states to stop spending on electric vehicle charging infrastructure, which obviously helps Tesla because they want to be the main EV charging stations around the country. So that kind of neuters their competition. He's already getting, some bang for his buck.
Right. Yeah, and also getting rid of the Biden administration EV tax credits, which he also blatantly said before, while he was campaigning with Trump, that getting rid of those tax credits would help Tesla because it's already got a dominated position in the market of EVs. So those are a couple things. And with regards to the SpaceX contract, he talked about it yesterday, and he said, let me see here. He said, "I'm not the one, filing the contract. It's people at SpaceX or someone who will be putting into the contract." So basically, he's saying, "Oh, it's not me. It's my company." Even though we all know that the way that he governs his companies are, extremely personal, bordering on inappropriate in terms of chain of command and how he will get involved in all of the minutia. Sort of like how James Cameron directs a movie. He's
Right.
like he'll go up to like a random PA. It's like their second day there and have them, give them specific instructions on what they're supposed to do. Elon is so involved with all these companies, and he's trying to claim that, well, no, it was actually someone else filling the contract. I don't really have a role in that. And
Mhm.
we can probably assume that that's not the case. So, I mean, I think all of his claims of transparency just don't add up whatsoever.
I want to play a clip or two from the Oval Office event yesterday. Get your thoughts.
To send this corrupt check to a person, or do you want us not to give it and give it back to the taxpayer? I would hope a judge would say, don't send it, give it back to the taxpayer.
Yeah, if I can add to that, what we're finding is that a bunch of the fraud is not even going to Americans. So I think we can all agree that if there's going to be fraud, it should at least go to Americans. But a bunch of the fraud rings that are operating in the United States and taking advantage of the federal government, especially in the entitlements programs, are actually foreign fraud rings. They're operating in other countries and actually exporting money to other countries. We should stop that. And this is big numbers. We're talking about $100 to $200 billion a year.
Putting aside the validity to that, because they haven't shown any evidence, if he was actually interested in truly going after waste, fraud, and abuse, I mean, it's not a secret. The Moby Dick would be the military. They've made some comments about looking into the military, but it's failed 7 audits in a row.
Mm-hmm.
But he's starting with, USAID and the education department. Based on your reporting, does it seem like they're actually looking at the big sources that you would think there'd be real waste, fraud, and abuse?
No, I mean, we have to factor in the scale here because, when you look at that X account for the Doge, tracker or whatever, their self-reported statistics of what they say they're getting rid of, it's like, $8 million here, $10 million here. It's like, peanuts compared to the sort of fraud that takes place, within the defense contracting industry. And I would be surprised if Elon was really allowed to touch that, the Pentagon spending, because, I mean, I just don't see how he would be able to get away with that. But I mean, I guess we'll have to see. I think anything's really on the table at this point. But I think that might be a bridge too far, even for Trump, to give him access to what the Pentagon is doing, because you're talking about hundreds of congressional districts heavily affected by those contracts. That the F-35 is like a couple hundred different districts, all the parts sort of being made. So that would cause a lot of problems for Republicans who would have to deal with constituents losing their jobs, et cetera. I mean, not that this Doge program really seems to be going after waste, fraud, and abuse to begin with. It's really just a massive culling system to get rid of the bureaucrats who Trump sort of blames for the inefficiency and sort of failures of his first term as president.
It also seems to me they're kind of alluding to it a little bit, that they want to get rid of waste, fraud, and abuse in Medicaid, in Medicare. So it almost seems like a workaround because they know that even amongst MAGA folks, making cuts to Medicare, Medicaid would not be popular. So it seems like they're alluding to finding fraud and waste, which it's a cut by a different name.
Right. And it's something that Trump said he wouldn't touch, on the campaign trail repeatedly.
Right.
And so I think I think you're probably onto something with that, that this is sort of getting around that and saying, well, no, we're not actually going after the programs that so many Americans rely on. We're just making them more efficient,
Right.
right? And of course, incorporating AI into that system is another huge project that they're undertaking.
Right. Let me play one more.
So, tell you, gravitas can be difficult sometimes. If there's not a good feedback loop from the people to the government, and if you have rule of the bureaucrat, or if the bureaucracy is in charge, and then what meaning does democracy actually have? If the people cannot vote and have their will be decided by their elected representatives in the form of the president and the Senate and the House, then we don't live in a democracy, we live in a bureaucracy. So it's incredibly important that we close that feedback loop. We fix.
I don't know if he knows the irony there, but he's talking about unelected bureaucrats that nobody voted for, while he, the richest man on the world, maybe people like the show that he put on at Trump rallies, but nobody voted for him. Again, not to ask you to put a psychology hat on, but is this just kind of a grandiose, semi-manic billionaire, or does he potentially know that he now seems to want to be the bureaucracy?
Yeah, I mean, I think he also wants to automate the bureaucracy to a large extent. I mean, they're feeding so much of this data into AI systems. Some of it they're working with outside entities to sort of build something or repurpose systems that already exist. And at the GSA, basically, they're using AI to figure out what buildings they can cut off, like cut leases for, and sort of cut the budget that way. Even as they're having this huge, return to work push, right? So getting all the federal workers back into the office. So I mean, it's hard to speculate any more than what we know, but as you said, this is someone who spent more than $250 million on the Trump campaign, and nobody elected him, and he's sort of grandstanding up there as if he was voted into office as
Right.
sort of co-president. Which, I mean, I guess the optics sort of might allude to that, but the ballots certainly don't.
Sure. Tell people more about Musk Watch, which is you and your colleague Substack. Describes itself as basically, digging into one of the most important humans on Earth, who right now, all jokes aside, at least seems to be more powerful than the vice president, perhaps equally as powerful as the president. Tell people about Musk Watch, what kind of work you guys are doing there.
Yeah, so we tend to have a weekly original report. Sometimes it's more than that, where we'll have something talking to officials at some of the agencies being affected, talking about what sort of information Musk could be extracting from these different agencies, the people he's hired to do that work for him, also anything sort of touching Elon Musk. And then on top of that, we also have a Friday morning roundup newsletter, which sort of gets into the last week of his companies, what he's doing with the government, what he's been doing abroad as far as tinkering with the politics of foreign nations, what his SpaceX contracts all over the world, things like that. So it's sort of just a full picture of his last week, the last week in Musk, essentially. And all of it's free. So subscribers, I mean, we obviously accept donations, but all the content is free. So if you subscribe, you don't have to pay anything.
Awesome. Well, thank you for taking the time. Sorry, you and the other poor souls having to look into this man, but it's important. Before Trump, the corruption was there, but it was kind of, comfortably in the back rooms. Now it's just in your face. So we need more reporting on this. Thank you, Caleb Akarma with MuskWatch.
Thanks so much.
Absolutely.